The Gilman Street venue is the iconic place, the holy ground that Green Day got their start. And after they blew up, because Gilman Street was such a DIY ethics place, they said, no more Green Day, okay? But in today's video, I propose the big band that came out of Gilman Street was Operation Ivy and not Green Day. So we're gonna jump into an alternate timeline, into a parallel universe, and kind of come up with a theory as to what would have happened if Operation Ivy didn't break up. Hey ladies, Dan Frampton here. How's it bet you like, comment, and subscribe? And first we're going to have to lay down a little bit of context, okay? Operation Ivy was this band that started in Gilman Street, same as Green Day. They famously went from 1987 to 1989. They dropped a record, it blew up, and then they broke up. But if we put on our time travel goggles, let's slip through this wormhole and discover what would have happened if Green Day didn't blow up. So first things first, in 1989, Operation Ivy still drops energy. That's one of the same things that happens from both timelines. And there will be similarities as we go through this. But the one thing I want to note here is, according to Google, 100% of people like this record. And I just want to show you that statistic. 100% of people like this album, and that's going to be the statistic that supports this theory. Keep that in mind as we go through this. 100% of people. So yeah, in 1989 they drop energy, but this time they don't break up. Instead, they tore the crap out of this thing. They're hitting town after town after town. They're going crazy, and 100% of people in 100% of the towns love this band. They keep touring their ass off from 1989 to 1991 when they re-release it as that 27-song LP that we all know and love today, which has a little bit of a different album cover, this one. So in 1992, they're really touring their ass off and making a name for themselves, so it's natural that the big record companies are coming sniffing. Grunge is still super hot in the scene right now. Everybody wants a band playing a guitar, you know, that's just kind of the vibe right now, and Operation Ivy just happened to be in 100% of the right places in 100% of the right time. But they choose not to sign to that major record label. Instead, they release another record DIY style. And this record goes on to be even bigger than Energy. So many tight songs, so many catchy hooks. So it's here we gotta discuss Lars Frederiksen. He was not in Operation Ivy. However, Matt Freeman of Rancid would actually be in Operation Ivy with Tim and Jesse Michaels. So in this timeline, Lars is just off doing his own thing in his own band. But that band happens to be opening for Operation Ivy. So the seeds are being planted. We still get Tim and Lars on the road together, you know, palling around, coming up with stuff, but in separate bands. And then in 1994, it happens. Operation Ivy signed to a major record label. It's probably not Interscope, I just pulled that up because of whatever, but it is a major record label, and that label releases their two previous DIY records, and they re-blow up all over again. Back at Gilman, Green Day is just totally fizzling out. They're seen as corny, and they're not really catching on. Tim's writing and charisma mixed with Jesse's magnetism just make for an iconic power duo. Matt Freeman is starting to be seen as a bass god, much in the same vein as Flea. But Lil B will always remain the based god. And because it's still Tim and Matt, and we got Lars on the road with them, they're starting to sound kind of like Rancid would at this time. So in 1995, a version of Out Come the Wolves comes out, but this time it's not Rancid on the cover, it's Operation Ivy. And it's not all the same songs, it's a little bit of a different vibe, but it's that iconic songwriting, it's those hooks, it's those melodies, it's that imagery, it's everything that this record was, but for Operation Ivy. And that just blows up, explodes all over MTV, all over the mainstream. Operation Ivy is legitimately the biggest band since Nirvana. There is no Green Day, there is no Dookie, there's nothing of the sort. Instead, it's replaced by Tim, Jesse, and Matt, and the rest of Operation Ivy, of course, just owning the mainstream. We get clips of Beavis and Butthead reacting to them. They're just getting interviews on every station, MTV, Much Music, Canada, US, they're in Europe. But because they got so massive, their roots, their hometown, Gilman Street, utterly reject them, which would be what would happen to Green Day when Green Day blew up in our current timeline. But instead, that happens to Operation Ivy in this timeline. But that doesn't really hurt them. They're still seen as legitimate punk rockers that came from a punk rock world, from the streets, and they just made it big by writing amazing songs that connected with 100% of the people. 100%. In 1997, they're seen as bona fide rock stars, and they drop a very experimental LP. This was seen as a supreme risk, but it pays off for them huge. They would keep touring with that weird record for 2 years until 1999, when Tim would start a side project with Lars Frederiksen, but this time it was a hardcore band called Rancid. This is a totally different Rancid in this timeline, but these guys together still come up with the band name and they still come up with the aesthetic, but because it's the year 2000 almost, and all of that catchy poppy stuff was done under the Operation Ivy banner, this time they wanted to go hardcore. In this timeline, the transplants don't happen the way we know it, but they still get Travis Barker to play the drums. So we got Travis Barker of Blink-182, because Blink-182 is definitely still a thing in this timeline. So he's a superstar. We got Tim Armstrong, who's seen as a superstar. Lars Frederiksen, who's always been around, you know, but now it's his time to shine. And Matt Freeman, all in the same band. This is going to be the biggest band in the world. But it's just a side project at this point. In the year 2000, Rancid 2000 still comes out pretty much the way we know it today, except the drumming is very Travis Barker-y. And because of all that star power, it shoots to #1 and kind of makes hardcore a mainstream thing. So now Tim is seen as someone that popularized punk rock, and now someone that brought hardcore to the mainstream. A lot of people are respecting this guy. I would say about 100%. 2001 would be the year that Operation Ivy actually break up in this timeline. Because Rancid is experiencing so much success, Jesse wants to just step back a little bit. He knows he can retire. He's totally chill. There's no jealousy. There's no resentment. Just Rancid, you go out and be Rancid. I'm going to step back. I'm going to be cool at home. But it's at this point the whole music world, the whole pop culture world showers Operation Ivy with praise. They go on one final tour and every venue sells out completely. There is so much money that's made off the back of this, and Jesse Michaels' retirement is set up to be a good one. In 2004, Rancid would become bigger than Blink-182, and that means Travis is going to want to join Rancid full-time, so he quits Blink. To replace Travis in Blink-182, they get Steve-O from Sum 41. Not Steve-O from Jackass, but that would be great though. Rancid's gonna drop a crazy record in 2004 and get in a whole bunch of drama in Europe. Lars Frederiksen would be held in Germany for like 3 or 4 months. And as we move into the 2000s, the world is gonna be adapting to streaming. Rancid stay pretty busy, but now bands like Madball, Bane, and H2O are household names. Operation Ivy was seen as pop-punk pioneers. Rancid was seen as hardcore pioneers, and Tim was seen as a musical genius, much like Kurt Cobain. He was seen as more prolific than Kurt Cobain, a much better writer than Kurt Cobain, but he just didn't sell quite as many records as Kurt Cobain. And that motivates him to start the Transplants. But in this timeline, the Transplants is his solo project, no Tim Time Bomb. As we move into the 2010s, rock and roll is starting to dry up. The sales are not really there anymore. The venues aren't packing up the way they used to. People are mostly here for the trap music. So in this timeline, around 2012, 2013, Tim Armstrong would start his record label and still call it Hellcat. But instead of signing punk bands, he actually signs a bunch of like emo rappers and mumble rappers. That whole SoundCloud aesthetic that was kind of popping at the time. He signs Lil Peep, Lil Peep explodes, and in this time, he's still with us today. Instead, it's Lil Pump that dies. Now Tim, on top of everything, all those genres he pioneered, he's seen as a forward-thinking, entrepreneurial genius. Oh, and he's never even heard the name Brody Dahl. But that brings us to today. Where are all these characters in the early 20s? Well, I'll tell you. After Green Day failed, Billy Joe quit music and decided he was going to try acting. He would become a character actor, and his biggest role was that of a corpse on Law & Order. Brody Dahl would never leave Australia. Jesse Michaels is low-key the happiest out of everybody. Travis Barker still becomes that Junya necklace, pave diamond, Kardashian-ass douchebag that we know and hate today. Rancid don't put out any more records, but they do get back together for like special events or whatever. And Tim Armstrong is sitting on top of an empire that he built from the ground up. He's a 38-time Grammy Award winner. And I don't know about you, but I think that timeline sounds a lot better than what actually happened. And I still get a Travis Barker to make fun of on the internet. Okay, if you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Ring the bell if you're cool as hell, and until my next upload, watch another upload.